Welcome to my Bible exegesis video. We began last time with the Roman Caesars, not because they are important in themselves, but that it's useful to know who they are when you're reading the Bible, because the Bible is a historical book as well as a religious and theological book, and it's got set in historical settings which people tend to ignore who know so little about the Bible. In actual fact, Herodotus, or Herodotus, depending on how you pronounce his name, is called the father of history, and maybe I'll do a video on that sometime. But Herodotus was just beginning when the Old Testament history was concluding. So the idea that he's the father of history was just an idea that was picked up by a Roman writer and has been followed slavishly by writers ever since who think they're intelligent if they can talk about the father of history. Now, the Old Testament is full of history and was written long before Herodotus. So well, that's just another little factoid for you. So where were we? We were dealing with the Roman emperors, and we finished off with Nero. Paul appealed to Nero, but he did actually get away the first time. He was let off, and that's an interesting story, what happened to Paul after his appeal to Nero. But he was released, and I'm of the view, and there are books on it, there's many references of this, that not only did he go west to Spain, as he tells us in his epistle to the Romans that that's what he wanted to do, but he also visited Britain as well, and then came back to Rome, where he was imprisoned for the second time, and he was put to death in Rome on that second occasion in the reign of Nero. So I think we finished off there. So maybe the next Roman emperor that of interest to you is Vespasian, because Vespasian was the one who came before he was the Roman emperor. He came and he invaded the land of Israel, and he was responsible for beginning the attack on Jerusalem that eventually led to the destruction of the temple in AD 70. And that's a date you must know, the destruction of the temple. This is what they call the Second Temple, because remember, Nebuchadnezzar destroyed the first one that had been built by Solomon, and the Second Temple was built, it was expanded by Herod the Great, and eventually it was destroyed by the Romans in AD 70. But it wasn't Vespasian that did that, it was Vespasian's son Titus, because Vespasian was summoned off to Rome to be the emperor. So he began the siege of Jerusalem, which took a long time and was a terrible, terrible siege. And you can read about the terrible details in Josephus, who was a Jew that went over to the Romans and who wrote important books that are a tremendous source of information with regard to this period of time. So Titus was the one that finished off the capture and destruction of Jerusalem, and he gave orders that the temple should not be destroyed, but it seems that it was accidentally burnt, and so it burned to the ground. And one view is that the gold in the temple melted in the heat, and it went in amongst all the stones, and such was the desire to retrieve all this gold that every single stone in the temple was unearthed so that they could get at the gold. And of course this fulfilled the prediction that Jesus said that one stone would not rest upon another of the temple, that their house is left unto them desolate. So that what you have now in the Temple Mount and the Wailing Wall is not the temple, but the foundation stones of the temple. And if you look at these stones, I mean, they're enormous stones. I mean, just it's just have a look at them and look at the people that are standing beside them and compare the height of a person with the size of these stones. And these are just the foundation stones. This was a magnificent building that had been built there. So that's Vespasian and Titus. It's worth now just following through, because there are some points with regard to both of these. Vespasian went back to Rome And then Titus, having plundered what they could of the temple, he brings this back to Rome, and there's what's called the Titus Arch, which has got a picture of the treasures having been looted from the temple, and what's often noted is the menorah, which is the candlestick taken out of the temple, and that is depicted on the Titus Arch. And Vespasian, the father, is still alive, and his big task is to build the Colosseum, and he's using money from the plundered treasures of the temple in Jerusalem to fund this huge project of building the Colosseum in Rome. So these are factoids that you want to just be useful to know about. But Vespasian dies just before the Colosseum is opened. It's certainly been built, but it's just before it's opened. So it's his son Titus that now has to see to and oversee the completion of the Colosseum. Most people know about the Colosseum because it was used to entertain the Roman citizens by putting slaves and Christians to death with fighting gladiators and fighting wild animals, etc., in the arena of the Colosseum. And the ruins of the Colosseum are still standing, and you can read about that on Wikipedia. But Vespasian, here's a little mnemonic to try to remember Vespasian. Remember about the eruption of Vesuvius. That's just a mnemonic. Vespasian, the emperor, dies. You've got Vesuvius, the volcano erupts, and it buries Pompeii. And that's a famous thing. You can look that up in Wikipedia about the discovery of Pompeii under all the ashes. And just as another factoid, there were two famous writers, Roman writers, called Pliny the Elder and Pliny the Younger. And Pliny the Elder was very interested in the eruption, this volcanic eruption, which was quite a unique thing. And that was in AD 79. And so he sailed off to go and get a closer look at it. And he perished. Pliny the Younger, many years later, wrote up an account of what happened, which was just so extraordinary that people didn't actually believe what he had written, and about what happened with regard to the eruption of Vesuvius. They just didn't believe what he was saying. But for those of you who know about Mount St Helens, which erupted, I think it was in 1980, and when they saw with their own eyes and filmed with their own eyes what happened on the eruption of Mount St Helens, which Christians should show some interest in because it's very useful for dealing with the evolutionary theory which permeates the brains of so many people, that when it erupted, they saw these pyroclastic flows, etc., which were described by Pliny the Younger, and they realised that he had been accurately describing what had gone on. And as so often happens, you get all these unbelievers. They don't believe anything that's written until they see it with their own eyes. And we'll come across that with regard to archaeology and the Bible. You must realise that archaeology is not the enemy of the Bible. The archaeology has been used to prove many of the things that the Bible had said. I've had occasion to mention that in the past, but we may come across more of that in the future. So, Titus became emperor when Vespasian died, but his short reign began with the eruption of Vesuvius, and of course, in this superstitious day, this made them wonder, did this mean the gods were not very happy with their new emperor? And then the next thing that happened is there was a fire in Rome. So these were two things happened within a very short time of Titus becoming emperor. So it was by opening the Colosseum and putting on a huge, big, splendid display for the people. He regained a popular acclaim amongst the people, and he died shortly after that. So that he actually died as one of the most popular emperors, simply because of all this entertainment which he had put on for them. So he had a short reign. So that helps you to, we'll just remember, we went from Nero, then we went on to Vespasian, then we went on to Titus, and these people are all relevant with regard to the background with your study of the Bible. So we'll leave it at that and mention one or two other ones on the next occasion.